Welcome to the Coralosophy Podcast. I'm Chris Muntz, and we're going to start this Thanksgiving episode with a thought experiment. I want you to picture your life, and I want you to go down to the nitty-grittiest of details. That meaning your early morning routine when you wake up. How do you feel emotionally? How do you feel physically? When you head into your job, whatever that might be, most of you probably in some kind of coral field, what is your attitude about that job? Do you go in with excitement? Do you go in with an energy to face the challenges of the day? Or would you feel, if you're being honest with yourself, that you approach the typical day with some type of dread of what if I get in trouble with someone today? What if I don't meet someone's expectations today? What if I'm not enough for my students, for my singers today? Is that part of your forefront of your mind? Or is it at the very, very back of your mind, like we all have, as some kind of nagging fear? Analyze that and file that away and as part of this experiment at the beginning of your day. Is that part of the beginning of your day? Then you think about your actual day at your job. Is it filled mostly with things that you see as exciting challenges or as hurdles that you resent? And then you look after the workday is over, when you come home. Are you excited to come home? And are you excited to be a part of some outside of work group of people? Whether it be a family, a group of friends, a support system that you connect with. Taking all of those details into consideration, is there a major element of your life, your work life, your personal life, that you would change if you were given a magic wand? And if there is, I just want you to think to yourself and name it. What would you change if you had the opportunity to change? That's half. Now we're halfway done with this thought experiment. After looking at all of those details, and again, it has to do this right. You have to do all the details. The good things have to have equal weight as the bad things. So looking at all the good things and all the bad things weighed equally. You're going to have some things that you'd probably want to change, but you need to also name, to complete this assignment, something that you would cherish, that is part of your life now, that you would not give up for anything. And again, that could be any part of your life. It does not have to be a job-related thing. It could be a personal side of life thing. It could be a family member. It could be a family structure, a friend. My point for this thought experiment is that I really don't believe that most of us on a regular basis, unless someone makes us, are very faithful to the idea of weighing our goods against our bads equally. I think most people, and I'm sad to say this, but I think it's true, most people lean heavier on the scale towards the negative things in their life. There are even some evolutionary biologists that I've read, Matt Ridley is one, which you'll hear from a little bit later in this episode, that would make the argument that there is a certain biological hardwiring in us to be pessimistic, to lean on the negative side. The way he would articulate it, and he does in his book, The Rational Optimist, is that he would explain it to you this way. If you are a caveman thousands and thousands of years ago, and you have a little bit of that extra pessimism in you to believe that if you dip down to the river to get your drinking water and you don't have that forefront of your mind, that fear that a lion might jump out and eat you, you might be the one that gets eaten by the lion because your genetic line will not continue, because it is the cautious ones that had their eyes on a swivel as they bend down to get the water. They're not trusting their environment, right? Now, the beautiful thing about being alive in 2019 is that lions don't hover around our water holes. We have other dangers, but to take any kind of rational look at the history of humankind, we live in a safer world. We live in a cleaner world with better medicine and access to protection from the elements that our ancestors did not have. But in Matt Ridley's case, as a biologist, he would make the argument that because of all those thousands and thousands of years of the pessimism being the way to win, we have that hardwired into us. And I'm not a scientist, so I don't know how to professionally evaluate that claim, although he makes a rational argument that makes sense to me. And I'd let you make up your own mind if you buy into that. But I think it at the very least bears some thinking about, is it possible that if the pessimism wins the day in the morning when I get up to get ready for my job, is it possible that I've got some kind of biological hardwiring that is making me want to feel that way? And can I counteract it? So in today's episode, I'm going to go into a little bit of a story of my own personal life and what makes me love what I do and what makes me thankful to get to do choral music for a living. And we're also going to hear a little bit from the Rational Optimist. There's a story I'd like to tell just to kind of encapsulate kind of my worldview around this idea of gratitude and how important it is. And then we're also going to hear from some of my friends. I asked them to share a little bit on their own, just to record from wherever they were, a message to you all about what they love about their profession and why they're thankful to be part of choral music for a living, and why they're grateful to have it be a part of their life. So we're going to hear from my friends Ryan Board, Giselle Wyers, Jennaya Robison, Ryan Main, Robert Gibson, Mark Lawley, and Andrew Crane. So stick around for that. That's going to be lots of fun. Their messages are all so interesting and unique. Before we get to that point, though, I would like to just give a little shout out. As you all know, it's very, very important to the success of this show to have locked in some affiliates on the program that are able to make the financial side of the show work. One of the things that I will say first off, before I even get to that point, is that I'm feeling a lot of gratitude right now on a personal note for my wife, Beth, and I am recording right now for the very first time in a brand new renovated space that in our house, but some of you have seen over the last few episodes, like the guest room, the little kids style guest room that I've been in is gone. That's all been torn out and redone. And my wife is just so brilliantly talented and has such an eye for design. And because she felt like I deserved a space for this show, she went out and created one. And so I feel a lot of gratitude for that. But part of the reason I thought about throwing that in right now is that to create a show that looks and sounds of high quality is not cheap. So we've gone out to create these affiliate relationships with these awesome vendors that are people that I interact with in my professional life. And by you going to use their promo code that they've provided for you on their website to get a discount for yourself, you're also helping the show financially and maintain the expenses of continuing to raise the production value of the show so that you continue to feel like it's a valuable professional development opportunity for you, which is really the goal of this show. So in order to do that, we've enlisted the help of RyanMain.com. Ryan Main is a self-published composer who does everything through his website at RyanMain.com, where you can use the Choralosophy checkout code to get a 10% discount on what he does. Is called a site license. And you get to make as many copies of that piece of music as you'd like in perpetuity, and you own it then. You own that PDF. So you can use the discount there, and I would check out his music, especially if you teach those high school and middle school level kids, because his music is always a hit every time I do it with those kids. And then another sheet music opportunity that you have as you're programming for your second semester is graphitepublishing.com. You can head over there and check out a wide range of composers: Tim Takash, Jocelyn Hagan, Eric Barnum, who's been on the show before, Joshua Shank. You're gonna hear from Paul Radoy in just a few seconds for the November edition of Composer Exposure, which has been a monthly segment featuring graphite composers. Choralosophy at checkout at that website too to get 10% off. And of course, Sight Reading Factory is a big one. We all could be and should be using Sight Reading Factory in our classroom. So check out their website and see what they have to offer for you. You can use promo code Choralosophy at checkout there as well. And last but not least, the newest affiliate on the program is Voce Vista Video. Voce Vista is a software that allows you to see the overtone series of all of the singers and the noises they make with their mouth, or really any noises that it hears, and it'll show you the overtones that are happening and which ones are loudest and softest. And I would encourage you, rather than me talking about it here, is to go to the most recent episode on the show. It's a very short one. It's about 10 minutes, and you can hear me explain more about what that product is, because it's revolutionary. I cannot oversell that enough. It has changed my entire choir class's understanding of what sound is and why it's important to actually shape their mouth in a certain kind of way. So you can head over to vocevista.com/Chorlosophy to check out that product as well and read a little bit more about it. So on the way into this, the gratitude on the way into the gratitude episode, I'm going to send you to the November installment of Composer Exposer with Paul Rudoy. Enjoy. Up next, Paul Rudoy, Composer Exposer. Okay, I'm here with Paul John Rudoy, who is the next victim of the Composer Exposer segment. Paul, welcome.
Nice to see you.
And we're going to jump right in and put you on the hot seat for the Composer Exposer rapid fire round. Are you ready?
I am.
If you had to work but didn't need the money, what would you do?
Probably something I was totally unqualified for. Like I would try to become a psychologist and see what happens.
Just like on the spur of the moment?
Yeah, honestly, I everything that I am doing right now, I'm quote unquote qualified for, but it would be really fun to try to do something that sounds cool. I mean, I think in another lifetime, I probably would have tried to be a psychologist or maybe go to the moon or something. So I'd try to do one of those things.
All right. If you could wedgie one historical figure, who would you wedgie and why?
That's a great question. Probably somebody who enjoyed humor like Rossini or Strauss. I think I would want to see what their reaction is. They'd probably be like, sure, okay.
Okay. What was the best thing before sliced bread?
Probably peanut butter. I live on that stuff. So.
Okay. What part of the human face is your favorite part of the human face?
Eyes and everything that's around eyes. We are so expressive, and often we see like our mouths move, and we see other things like my hair or lack thereof. But eyes are like the most expressive thing.
Okay. Awesome. If you could only speak one word for a whole day to get you through the day, what word would you choose?
All of my friends, Tim Takash knows this well, but probably whoa. Or because I get very excited about almost everything.
I will go. The judges will give you whoa. I don't know that counts as a word.
Yeah, it's an extreme word.
Okay, and then the last one. No one will come to your house to check this, so do your best.
Okay.
How many pennies would fit in the room you're in right now?
In the room that I'm in? I don't know. It's a pretty big studio. Probably 10 or so.
10 pennies? Oh, 10 million pennies.
I love that. Yeah, 10. 10 giant pennies. Yeah,
okay.
Exactly.
Gotcha. All right. Well, you survived.
Yeah.
All right. So tell us about some of the work that you've published on graphite. If you had to pick a favorite thing you have on graphite, what would that be?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I should say that the pieces on graphite that have been successful, specifically Jennaya, has really taken off, and I've really enjoyed experiencing that with people. But if I were a dog, the piece that I wrote last year and published last year is, I think, the most dear to me because it kind of came out of nowhere, similar to Jennaya. And I don't have a dog. And I saw that text and I decided I wanted to set it. And by the time I finished, it's because of the poem, but by the time I finished the piece, I was just like weeping daily trying to like get through it. Because the poem is so great. It goes from the moment of like peeing on the side of the road to finding the right master for you, including if you're beaten, you have the ability to leave and find a better master. And then at the end, it's like, I bring if I were a dog, I would bring the stick back and that would be my heart. It's like, I just can't, I don't know. So setting that made me realize that a newfound respect for animals and pets and how they affect us emotionally. And
So
I'm really proud of the piece. So
do you have a dog now then?
we weirdly, we got a dog, but it was through the grapevine. So it was a 9-year-old corgi.
Okay.
And it turned out that she had late stage kidney disease. So she died within 2 weeks of us getting her. But as sad as that is, it also was a real blessing in disguise because we were able to give her a really comfortable environment, which to die. And that's something that many humans and many animals don't get. So I'm excited to get a slightly younger dog at some point.
Yeah, so that's really cool. And I will also vouch, listeners, I will vouch for Giselle. We just did that with our boys at school. And
great.
Yeah. My associate teacher bought it and mostly did most of the teaching. But we team teach. It's a larger choral program, high school choral program. We did it with our beginning boys, and
Cool.
we could have done more with it, of course, with our older boys. But it was they loved it, and we were able to be creative with it. So that one I would recommend for sure. But I'm going to have to check out the dog piece because I'm definitely a dog person.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I Jennaya and If I Were a Dog both just kind of wrote themselves, which is always a wonderful surprise as a composer.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, well, thank you so much, and we're really excited to check out some of your music, and make sure that people head over to Graphite and check out some of Paul's music. And I'm sure you're working on more. Do you have any coming up?
yeah, actually, I'm a part of an art song consortium with 4 different composers in Graphite, and so this is a setting of a translation of a mystic poet by Daniel Ladinsky. It's St. Thomas Aquinas, and it's called The Pulse of God. And I've split it up. It's one poem, but I've split it up into 3 small miniatures. So it is a song cycle, but each is 1 to 2 minutes. I'm excited because it's starting as a song cycle, but I'm definitely planning for it to be a choral piece as well.
That's great. And for a lot of us in the choral profession, we are choir directors, but also teach private voice lessons and do other things. So there'd be an opportunity to find some new and interesting lit for your kids. Well, thank you, Paul, for coming on, and have a great day.
Thank you.
As promised, I'm going to start this segment with a selection from The Rational Optimist by Matt Ridley, which is, by the way, a book that I highly recommend if you are interested in gathering information about the world we live in a way that attempts to just detach us from the phenomenon that I was discussing at the beginning of the episode in the open, that we are hardwired to be pessimistic. And if you're interested in learning some hard data about maybe some of the ways we shouldn't be pessimistic, maybe that there is room for optimism in the world, this is an excellent book that changed the way I looked at the world almost completely. And I'm going to read a little bit of an excerpt from the opening of this, so I hope you enjoy. This should not need saying, but it does. There are people today who think life was better in the past. They argue that there was not only a simplicity, tranquility, sociability, and spirituality about life in the distant past that has been lost, but a virtue too. This rose-tinted nostalgia, please note, is generally confined to the wealthy. It is easier to wax elegiac for the life of a peasant when you do not have to use a long-drop toilet. Imagine that it is 1800, somewhere in Western Europe or Eastern North America. The family is gathering around the hearth in the simple timber-framed house. Father reads alone from the Bible while Mother prepares a dish out of stew of beef and onions. The baby boy is being comforted by one of his sisters, and the eldest lad is pouring water from a pitcher into the earthenware mugs on the table. His elder sister is feeding the horse in the stable, and outside there is no noise of traffic. There are no drug dealers, and neither dioxins nor radioactive fallout have been found in the cow's milk. All is tranquil. A bird sings outside the window. Oh, please. This is one of the better off families in the village. Father's scripture reading is interrupted by a bronchitic cough that presages the pneumonia that will kill him at 53. Not helped by the wood smoke of the fire, and he is lucky. Life expectancy in England was less than 40 in 1800. The baby will die of the smallpox that is now causing him to cry, and his sister will soon be the chattel of a drunken husband. The water the sun is pouring tastes of the cows that drink from the brook. Toothache tortures the mother. The neighbor's lodger is getting the other girl pregnant in the hayshed even now, as her child will be sent to an orphanage. The stew is gray and gristly, yet meat is a rare change from gruel. There is no fruit or salad at this season. It is eaten with a wooden spoon from a wooden bowl. Candles cost too much, so firelight is all there is to see by. Nobody in the family has ever seen a play, painted a picture, or heard a piano. School is a few years of dull Latin taught by a bigoted martinet at the vicarage. Father visited the city once, but the travel cost him a week's wages, and the others have never traveled more than 15 miles from their home. Each daughter owns 2 wool dresses, 2 linen shirts, and 1 pair of shoes. Father's jacket cost him a month's wages, but is now infested with lice. The children sleep 2 to a bed on straw mattresses on the floor, and as for the bird outside the window, tomorrow it will be trapped and eaten by the boy. What is the moral that Matt Ridley is trying to point out to us here? When we learn about history, and when we form our opinion about the world that we have inherited from our ancestors, we learn about history from our history classes, which are ultimately history of wealthy people. Those are the ones signing the treaties that we learn about in high school history class, right? And we learn from movies, where all the stories from the movies are about the people who live in the castle, right? But for the average person, and the story that you just heard was a representation of what would be the average wage earner on planet Earth in a middle-class industrialized country. So that's not even talking about the third world back in the 1800s. We're talking about the typical working class British, American, Eastern European person. That second part of the story was what life was really like. When you start to read the statistics that prove that that's true, and you wrap your mind around really the breadth of that and what that means for the world we live in today, even on the days that we wake up, and think back to the thought experiment that I had you do at the beginning, even on those days that we wake up and we think that we are just so unfortunate, we're not. And my thought about that information is that first is an overwhelming sense of gratitude to be alive when I'm alive. That to me overwhelms my thought process every single day. And it's something I try to pass on to my children and to my students at school, but mostly my children because that's my job, is to override their sense of pessimism with a sense of gratitude. It's extremely powerful for your worldview and for your psychological health. And the data shows that it's the more accurate worldview, which I find interesting because that's not what we get from the news, right? We get a very contradictory story from the news. And there's it's a whole different podcast episode, by the way, about why the news wants us to think about that. But the short version is, are you more likely to tune in, which is how they make money? Are you more likely to tune in if you're afraid for your life, or to hear about good news from every town? Just the reality is we wouldn't tune in for the Good News Network. We want to hear, again, we want to be the caveman leaning down to the water, looking around for all of our problems because we think it will save us, that we'll be ready if something bad happens. Right? That's again, hardwired into us, but the reality is the world is getting better. So here's another one for you choir directors out there, a way to think about this. If you were going to make a living as a musician 200 years ago, you were not a choir director. You were an organist, a composer, a teacher of the singers, probably a full-time employee for a court of some kind or a church. Those were your choices. But the idea of today that we get to specialize in the voice and directing choirs and furthering choral music. As you heard Tony Silvestri say in a recent episode, that we believe, he and I agree, that we are having a renaissance of choral music. Well, I don't think we should ignore the influence of having now of several generations in the last, especially since ACDA has been founded, generations now of people who specialize in directing choirs. In the grand scheme of music, that is a really new thing. Like there was no high school choir director for a living 100 years ago, or 150 years ago for sure. You had to be a jack of all musical trades the further back you go. I mean, I'm old enough to know some of previous generation choral directors that would still remember the days when in order to get a job at all directing a choir, you had to be an organist. You had to also be an organist. And so think about how much time you've spent as you have learned to be a choir director studying specifically the voice. Well, if you're spending all of your time as a young musician learning to play the organ, you're not studying the voice. You've got to choose a specialization, and we get to do that. We get to live in 2019 where people can specialize down to the nitty-gritty area, and we've even got folks in our profession that specialize within the choral profession. You've got people who specialize in gospel. You've got people who specialize in jazz. You've got people who specialize in show choir or in children's choirs or in collegiate choirs. And we can even zero in on, for example, I could say I'm an expert in X time period of choral music. And we still have room for that person. That's amazing. So I feel a ton of gratitude to get to do this profession academically at a time and be alive at a time when we have an economy that supports that. Of course, we can all go out there and complain about how we don't get paid enough as teachers. But the bottom line is, I'm making a living. Quibbles aside about how much I think I should be getting paid, and all teachers do, and we should advocate for ourselves. But the point is, I get to do choir. I get to wave my fingers and noises come out of people's body, and then at the end of the month, a paycheck that sustains my family arrives in my bank account. That's ridiculous. In a historical standpoint, if you look at with the broad view of human history, the idea that 200 years ago, the average human's main concern every day, in that story that I read you at the beginning of this segment, the main concern on most days was just earning enough to survive the day, tracking down enough calories to survive, and fast forward, a very short amount of time in the broad spectrum of human history. Fast forward just a little bit of time, and all of a sudden, I've got a house because I wave my fingers. Imagine telling that to a farmer in 1850. He would laugh at us. Like, how is that possible that we could live in a world that supports that? So I'm not saying don't complain about teacher pay. Advocate for yourself, but do it with some perspective. We are so lucky. We are so lucky to do what we do. So I'm feeling very Thanksgiving-y right now as it relates to the choral profession, and not to mention this podcast, and all of you listeners, and those of you who have stuck with this show from the beginning, and the people who have just recently joined and subscribed. And so I encourage you to, if you have not yet, subscribe on a device, leave a rating, send an email to choralosophy@gmail.com. Make sure you reach out and be part of the conversation. We also have a Patreon page, which is patreon.com/choralosophy, where you can be part of the inner circle, so to speak, where on that site we have some patron-only episodes once a month. We also have some other perks. There's a t-shirt. There's some extra resources for some of the nuts and bolts episodes that I do. There's also, and this is a new thing, I'm going to start leaking guests on the Patreon ahead of time so that Patreon members can ask the guest questions ahead of time. So head on over to patreon.com/choralosophy and join over there for as little as $3 a month. It's the cost of a coffee. And that's going to help offset the cost of the show and hopefully turn it into something that I can do for the rest of my life, which again would be an amazing sense of gratitude along the same lines. Imagine if I could wave my fingers and make noises come out of people and sit down in front of a computer screen and talk about the fact that I wave my fingers around and call that a profession. That is just amazing. Being a human is awesome. Being a human is so awesome. And to live in a world like that in 2019. So I'm feeling very grateful for that. On a personal note, I mentioned already early in the episode, I'm so thankful for my wife, Beth, but I'm also just thankful to be a dad and to be a part of a family. I think about that every single day. One of the things that rides my mind as I drive into work every morning is just that sense of purpose that being part of a family gives you. So I'm very, very grateful for that as well. What I'd like you to do, if you're willing, is to go on the Choralosophers Facebook page, if you've not already joined there, and just drop a note this week of what you're thankful for. So I strongly encourage you to do that. I'd love to hear from you. And I'll do a little reminder there at the end of that as well. I'd like to move next into a little string of some messages from my friends. I mentioned earlier, you're going to hear from some choral directors from a lot of levels of teaching and a lot of levels of experience that I tried to put together a diverse panel of, collegiate folks and people who work with middle school children and a variety of different perspectives, high school person, just to get an idea of why they like the choral profession and what it means to them. And I was pleasantly surprised. I think you're going to enjoy. You ask a bunch of people the same question, and there's a little bit of fear you might get a bunch of the same answer. But they were all so interesting and unique. So stick around and listen to these next little stories from the guests, and I think you're going to really enjoy.
Hey, Andy Crane here, Brigham Young University, from the hotel room on a guest conducting gig, and I thought I'd take a minute to respond to Chris's request about why I do what I do. I think if I had to answer that, it goes back to high school when happenstance I got involved in choir. I didn't really sing much before then, and kind of did it for social reasons in high school. And I had a teacher who was so great. I remember singing Mozart and Brahms and Monteverdi and Palestrina, Carmina Burana, like all this stuff in high school. And later would find out that not everybody had that same high school experience. But I just so happened that I was brought up singing those great works as a high school student. And so I always have had this great love of the art form. And I still love it just as much to this day. I love singing this stuff. I love conducting it. I love rehearsing it. And I love seeing other people love it also. And being and interacting with like-minded folks who are just as nerdy about choral music as I am. I haven't gotten tired of it yet, and don't think I ever will. I wake up every morning just excited to engage with this art form more. So I guess that's just a simple answer as to why I do what I do. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Bye.
Hi, everybody. Ryan Board here from Pepperdine University, and happy to say a few words for choralosophy. Why choral music? First, why did I get into it? And second, why do I continue to be into it? And why do I like to teach it? And really hard, profound questions to ask, and yet clearly there's something there, because all of us crazy choral directors just love to do this thing. So for me, I think the first thing I'll say is I got into choral music because I could not be in it. And I'm sure that's the same for a lot of people, but there was something for me about within a group of people getting together and seeking out ways to express the greatest depths and the greatest breadths of human expression. And I don't know why that gets into a person like it does, but I think as human beings, once we have all of our basic needs taken care of, this idea that we would seek out relationship and understanding is fundamental and primal to our very nature. And the greatest kind of relationships are in a community setting, and what is more concentrated and intimate than singing in a group of people texts and music that has to do with the great spectrum of what it means to be a human being. And I couldn't have explained that when I was an elementary school student or a junior high student and a high school student, and I will never fully understand it, but there is something that goes to the very core and every fiber of my being when I am working with a choir and singing with a choir, and I can't live without it. The second part, the why do I continue to do it? That's on the one hand simple. That's because I want everybody that I've work with every student that I work with to experience that same thing. And to expand on that maybe a little bit, to add a little perspective on some things I've been thinking about recently. There's a great book out that's dedicated to our great Bach scholar Robin Lever. And one of the contributors to the essays in this book is D.E. Salier. And he talks about how the opposite of beauty is not ugliness, but the opposite of beauty is in fact terror. And my students in this day and age, with their devices, their access to news and social media, they are aware more profoundly than generations past of the kind of terror that exists across the world. And I think what that does for all of us, at least it does for me, is I become very, very poignantly aware of the great privilege it is to sit in a nice, peaceful classroom with folks and do the music that we do. And that in fact, is in great contrast to the reality of so much of the world. And in that way, I think our music making inspires us to reach out and add a service component, to look for understanding, to ask big questions. Why is our world not the way it's supposed to be? And I think choral music making is an expression of humanity in its most divine and perfect sense, and to seek to share, to understand, and to look at why the rest of the world or parts of the world cannot be engaged in this kind of momentary artistic expression of the highest spiritual level is a big question and needs to cause us to ponder. And so I enjoy bringing all those things to the table for my students, and it feeds me every day, brings me a tremendous amount of satisfaction and meaning to my life. So thanks, Chris. Happy to have an opportunity to answer that question. Love you all. Bye-bye.
Hi, I'm Jennaya Robison, coming to you from Luther College in Decorah, Iowa. I want to talk to you today about perfectionism. So about 18 months ago, I had some vocal issues that rendered me completely voiceless. And after going to the speech and language pathologist, we figured out that I had a hemorrhagic vocal polyp, a pretty big hemorrhagic vocal polyp that required surgery. And after surgery and 6 weeks of complete and total vocal rest, I was able to start speaking a little bit again and prepare for a pretty big conducting gig that I was excited to do and didn't want to give up. But getting in front of these students for an entire week was a huge feat. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't sing. I could hardly talk. I had never in my life felt so imperfect and so vulnerable. And it was through that week of showing these students that I had limits and I had weaknesses, that it created a musical experience that I can't quite put into words. For a group of high school sopranos and altos, I think it was one of the most important lessons for us all to sit around and learn, because we talked about it in the choir that as women, often we're socialized very differently than our male counterparts in society, and that we socialize boys to be brave and we socialize girls to be perfect. And suddenly I was very far from perfect. And what I loved and why I came into this profession, that's singing, I couldn't do anymore. And I really didn't know if I ever could again. And it created the most beautiful relationship between me and the singers that I've ever experienced. And suddenly it allowed them to be able to also be vulnerable and show that they weren't perfect and to open up. And we had hours one night after a rehearsal where we sat around and we talked. They shared their pain, They shared their feelings of loneliness and imperfection and vulnerability. And it is a night that truly I will never forget. And it changed my life because I believe that through what I am called to do, and that is to make music as a conductor and choral music specifically, that our goal is not just making perfect music, but it's the music that helps us to understand what it is to be better people. And
Mark Lawley from Willard High School.
The thing that I continue to find so fascinating about choral music is how much we really need each other. It just takes one singer who decides to pollute the vowel or not blend or not be in stylistic agreement with the ensemble for the experience not to be a cohesive and artful one. And how it takes the conductor and every single singer, and if there is an accompanist, working together to create something of beauty. And I love the parallel that we can draw between choral singing and living as a healthy contributor, as a citizen of the world. And I still maintain that if every single person in the world sang in a choral ensemble and understood what it takes to create something of beauty, sometimes we have to give up our idea of what our best sound is so that we can blend with the ensemble, so that we can move with great precision and yet flexibility to allow the music to truly speak. And those same things can happen in life if we're sensitive to people on our right and our left, people that we work with, people that we encounter at the grocery store. We can create ensemble wherever we go. And that is my mission, to help high school students understand how they have a voice. They have an important voice, but also they need to find ways to be a part, to be a healthy contributor, to make things better. You know, I love saying that when we enter the room, we affect the climate of the room, we affect the temperature, and we're responsible for that. So being awake and aware to always bring love, care, and to be a part of what is going on and not to be lost in our own story. So those are the things that I find intriguing and meaningful about choral music. I hope you all enjoy a great Thanksgiving.
Hi everyone, my name is Ryan Main. I'm a composer and I'm the director of the Youth Chorus of Kansas City. And I'm also a sponsor and a fan of the Choralosophy podcast. And I'm here today to share with you some of what motivates me and inspires me as a creator and as a director. And hopefully there will be something in this that inspires you too. And so a lot of my philosophy comes from my experience as a teacher in a public school. I started teaching in 2009 in a middle school outside of Kansas City, Missouri, and in a program that was really non-existent. And my goal was to build something that would serve my students who were in a very low-income situation, something that would serve them well and give them something to strive for, a reason to work hard, or something to take pride in. And what I realized in the first few years there was that no one could see my vision and no one could see what was in my head. And a lot of times when I tried to talk about what the performance was going to be like, or what it would be like if we could perform at a state conference or a regional conference, that didn't really mean much to my students or even my administrators. But what did matter to them was if I could take them one step closer to that every day and every interaction. And to say that another way, what I learned is that Great programs are built one interaction at a time. A great nonprofit, a great business is built one conversation, one positive interaction at a time. And that now informs really everything that I do. I look at every interaction as an opportunity to make whoever I'm talking to feel valued. And I'm not perfect at it. I fail sometimes, but that is how I look at the people around me, the people that I work with, the directors that I'm lucky enough to work with as a commissioned composer. Everyone wants to feel valued, including our students. And if we take that philosophy into each interaction, if we view the long-term goal as being built by bricks of just one conversation at a time, I think that it can sometimes change something that sometimes feels frustrating, that people can't see what's in our head, that our students don't necessarily see the value in going home and learning their music immediately. And it's honestly, even now, how I approach projects as a composer, that when I look at a blank page and I'm not feeling inspired, I stopped panicking about that. And now I sit at the piano and I create something, and I put at least one measure on paper, and usually more measures come after that. And so it's something that is deeply useful to me, and it's something that I hope that I continue to get better at. And I hope this is useful to you. Thank you for allowing me to share with you, and I wish you the very best.
My name is Robert Gibson. I am the choir director at Reed Academy in Springfield, Missouri. My why, or the reason why I do what I do, is, one, I just love teaching music. And I love teaching music on the middle school level. I never thought that I was going to be good enough to teach music at this level, but I'm grateful that over the years I've developed a lot of skills, not just from professional development, but even from my students, that have helped me to become a better educator. I also love that I get to inspire kids, because I know that the words I speak are going to ignite something in my kids that they never thought about or considered. I find nowadays in schools that students speak a lot of negativity on themselves. So they say, I am not good, and I'm bad, and I'm depressed, and I don't like myself, and I am not a good singer. And in a way, I get to re-speak what they don't think they're good enough in. And I love getting to tell a kid, you are good, and you are important, and you are great, and there is greater in you. I don't think that kids really understand the power of words, but I'm a firm believer that words can become your reality the more and more you speak them. So the more I get to say you're great, a kid starts to believe that, and a kid starts to act like a great person versus somebody who is not. I have some wonderful musical influences over my life. In public education, Mr. Fleming, Miss Connor, and Miss Bonner were my three influences. And on top of telling me how great I was and how wonderful I was as a singer and as a musician, they also did not allow me to slack off. They didn't allow me to continue with poor behavior. They continued to stay on me all the way until that behavior changed. And so now I'm in the position where if I see a student who is not acting accordingly in love, I can say, that's not who you are, and you don't have to do that because you're great. And I'm glad that my students love me enough that they believe me and they respect what I'm saying, and they change those behaviors. So I'm thankful to be where I'm at, and I'm thankful that my why is shown every single day when my students walk in my room and they do better because they know I care.
Giselle Wyers, University of Washington.
Hi, Chris and Choralosophy folks. I'm going to try to overcome my shyness about being on camera today on a Sunday afternoon here in Seattle. just to share some of my thoughts about the meaning of music and why I do what I do, what drives me through every day and the ups and downs of all of the challenges that we encounter in the field. So I thought about it for a few days, and I think one of the things that we should say up front is just that it's certainly a mystery. Just making music and how much we love music and the whole process of being in rehearsal, there's sort of a mysterious quality to it, I think, and it's something unspoken that drives me a lot of the time. It's just sort of who I am in the same way that I love animals or I love my family. But if I were to try to put some words to it, I would say conducting is one of the things that I always lose track of time. I've gotten better as a conductor. Of course, you have to keep track of time, but losing track of time, being in the flow state, feeling utterly immersed in what I do, and feeling like every rehearsal sort of gives me something back, and that I'm creating something really beautiful, and well, hopefully beautiful, that I'm working for beauty with my students every day and creating what one of my grad students calls a rarefied air around the space that we're in. And I think that's really precious, and we don't get to do that enough. I think the other thing is I think about the people, and I think about all of the people that I've encountered through the field, whether it be fellow students and programs I was in, or my students now, colleagues, other composers, industry leaders, publishers, and just so very few people that I wouldn't want to be around, because we have a shared value and we have a love for each other and for process and for creation, which is really what I think conducting should be about. So in that vein, I thought I would close with a sketch of something I'm working on right now for an upcoming commission and be completely in process because I don't know if I'll play it right. So at risk of offending everyone, leaving you on a deceptive chord that's unresolved, thank you again and have happy holidays.
Special thanks to all of my guests on this episode, and thanks to you for sticking around to the end of the episode. And I hope, if nothing else, in this Thanksgiving week episode, I've given you the spur, and these stories have given you the spur in the side to reflect a little bit on your own life and your own career, and looking for the things to be thankful for, and trying to articulate them and learn to name them. And one of the activities that I did just this week, just today actually, as I record this with my students, was sit down all of the classes and made them, uncomfortably in some cases, listen to and talk through some of the things that we are thankful for in the choir classroom environment and then in their own personal lives, just making it a share time and a group building time, which at the high school level, many of you know, is critical. Without that group building time, it's really hard to push them when the rubber meets the road. And so we sat down and we talked about some of these things. And one of the things that I pointed out to them was just how truly remarkably special it is that in the US and in some parts of the world, we can, basically for free in a public school, have a choir class for a grade that's taught with the quality of an academic subject, and not having to go outside of the school day and investing the time and the money that many people in many parts of the world would have to invest in order to have a daily choir experience. That's a huge benefit to the students that we interact with in the U.S. And of course, I've got listeners from around the world, but of course, a vast majority of you are here in the U.S. And so we are so fortunate in this country and in many countries within a similar structure of educational system to have that embedded in the school day. And I pointed that out to the kids today and made sure they really tried to understand, wrap their mind around how lucky that makes them. And so I'm hoping that as you go to your Thanksgiving break, this episode should come out on Wednesday before Thanksgiving. So as you're listening or get to it at some point during the break, please take the time to reflect in this way and to think about the things that you should and can be thankful for as it relates to our profession, because it's a pretty amazing place to be. So thank you so much. And another reminder on the way out the door, if you would like to support the mission of this show, there are a variety of ways you can do it. Make sure you subscribe to the show on the app that you use. You can find the show on the Apple Podcast app, Spotify, Stitcher. You can find it on YouTube, pretty much any app that you get podcasts on. So hit subscribe there, and the best thing you can do is leave some kind of a review, because the more reviews there are, the more that pops up into the podcast feed, and that's very helpful. Hopefully it's a nice review, and that helps a lot. Another ways you can do it is share the episodes on social media, and then of course, if you're really into it, you can head over to patreon.com/Coralosophy and join a growing crowd of folks over there who are interested in the t-shirt, they're interested in the patron-only episodes, and they're interested in the more in-depth conversation that we're able to have there with a smaller crowd. So we just recently did our first live episode on Patreon just a couple days ago, and people can tune in during the episode as I'm filming it and ask questions, which is a cool thing that we're trying out there. So if you want to be a part of that, again, Patreon for as little as $3 a month is an opportunity for you. Tune in next time, and we'll see you later on the Coralosophy podcast.